Okay, so we have a short presentation that's I think we wanted to not be too formal in presenting thoughts that are complete, but just basically posing questions that have been coming up, and not just recently, but over the course of I mean our lives really, but especially the last couple of years for me, coming back to the West, coming back to North America after living in India with Andrew and Shane too, for all those years, and trying to question and situate myself here again. Oh, and there's people in the waiting room. Let them in. And so I think that this presentation is supposed to be more just some asking some questions and leaving them as open and to be discussed and to be contemplated and to bring into this space that we hope to have as a community. Let's see here. Just share my screen. Oh, it's not coming up. Okay. And we'll do this for maybe about 15, 20 minutes. It seems as though everybody on this call does know us, which is great. Meaning that if there are people that aren't familiar with us and I'm not noticing on the list, then we can, have more of an introduction later. But I think everybody here is quite familiar with myself, Jonathan, my wife Shana, and Andrew. Um, and so I think we're looking at ourselves as more facilitators, and which is why we want I think to open things up to being questioned and to being engaged in a community way, um, in a as the main emphasis of what this is about. Um, Another reason, I mean, why is this happening right now? I mean, that's an interesting question I've been asking myself, and it seems like I mean, I just sort of have finished my master's and I'm going into my PhD. And Shane and I have been home I mean, living in North America for a couple of years, and it just seemed like a lot of things started coming together in terms of these questions. And after thinking about things enough on your own, or let's say after practicing music enough on your own, you just need people to play with. You need people to resonate with, and so I think I'd like to just to read a short little thing, just to sort of share where I'm coming from, where I guess I'm being inspired and pulled towards. Um, Sort of questions that we can ask ourselves and use as a way of sort of grounding, I guess, this community. So this is called Sonic Ecology, a call to sound together. What would life be like if we privileged our experience as sound instead of sight? We would experience ourselves as modes of melodies and rhythms, and flow in the inherent musicality of life as it sensuously unfolds. I invite you to extend your sonic awareness into the natural world around you, resting completely in the soundscape of your environment. Now turn your awareness inward by following your breath towards an inner stillness. Imagine yourself, hear yourself as multiplicities of harmonic resonant nodes. What kind of melodies and rhythms do you hear? Now listen deeply to your family, friends, and social collectives. What songs or compositions emerge? From this perspective, we can see how we inhabit an ever-flowing plurality of interwoven sound worlds in which the collective container becomes an ecology of resonant sound bodies. The Greek root word of symphony, symphonos, means sound together. And I would like you to think of life as an experimental symphonic ritual of integrally sounding together. How can we reframe our daily sonic territories and musically re-enchant our worlds, where each individual attunes itself in a cosmic musical entanglement of becoming symphony. Sounds can be seen as nutrients, melodies like loved ones, songs like archetypal wisdom figures, all of which are necessary to nurture holistic ecologies of becoming sound. These interpenetrating spheres of individuating musical resonances are sound worlds, the cosmic quilted canvas of our psychosomatic experience. Sound worlds are at once individual and spiritual, collective, social, and political, all of which form nodes in the unfolding cosmic symphony. The organization of sound into pitch and rhythm is therefore always political and ethical. Music can be used as a weapon to surround and enslave one in a sound world of machinic production and consumption, or it can be a revolutionary cry of liberating and harnessing the sonic territory of resistance, carving out an independent territory from hegemonic noise. Contemporary problem of becoming can thus be framed. How can one find and develop the poise of inner silence deep enough to truly hear the constellation of the sound worlds that we inhabit? Furthermore, how can we assemble our own unique sound mandalas that will allow harmonic individuation across all modes of becoming? It is time to reclaim and refrain our sonic territories, and through exploration and experimentation, we can reimagine humanity in an ecological way that can be holistically nurtured in a sounding together. So that was a little bit of a meditation that I guess I went on in terms of thinking about sound differently, and wanted to sort of preface what we're doing with some of these thoughts. Okay, so a little bit about Monsoon-Music. Monsoon, as many of you know, and has had a history, and it was formed by my brother and Justin and I many years ago, and it's taken on a shape that contains some of our products, and we organize music festivals, and we try to engage in the international like world music scene or Indo-Jazz scene. And for the past many years, it's been sort of in a little bit of a hiatus as 1 second, there might be people in the waiting room. Yes, there is. Okay, I can't, darn it. Technical problem here. All right. No, we can't do this.
I can see.
1 second. Sorry, this is my screen is not. All right, that's not working. I'm just going to continue.
You have to get out of, John, do you have to get out of the screen share to let people in maybe? Or
I know. Oh, there we go. Yes, thank you. Thank you. I'll just let that Tanya in. Yeah.
I think you can just drag it.
Oh my gosh.
You can click, drag it away.
There we go. Nope.
Just drag the whole thing away because I think you're admitted here.
I'm having technical problems here. Sorry about this, everybody. I'm not sure how to make this larger. Nope. All right, I'm going to continue. Sorry about that. Okay, so all right, I'm not sure. There we go. I'm just going to continue on. Okay, so we just wanted to say that the Monsoon-Music hasn't been doing much or anything in the last little while, as we all sort of took on different paths in our lives, and for whatever reason, we felt that this was a time to sort of reimagine its possibilities, I guess, and we wanted to open it up into not something that we run like the way it used to be. We wanted it to be a collective initiative. We wanted actually to really experiment and see how artists can come together and run and manage based on what we need and what we feel that we want in a record label and an online community. I think it's important to also say that there's going to be, some musicians here right now that we would love to be involved. There's also going to be people that aren't necessarily musicians, but that doesn't matter. I think that everybody can get involved in whatever capacity they feel that they would want to. Um, so just a little bit about the why. I think there's a great cultural need to start conversations which engages in reframing questions about art, culture, and modernity in a way that can be empowering and transformative. I feel that there's a huge need for a collective energy to be invested, and really to step back from some of the systems that we've grown up in, like the industrial systems, and question sort of the problems of our becoming, the idea of what are some of the problems. And everybody is going to have a different experience and a different problem of becoming, but I think that this is a place that we can talk about these things and aim and organize ourselves accordingly, to explore those. I have always been inspired, and we've all been inspired by collective work, the idea of co-creation, cohabitation, and again, not in the idea of coming up with solutions, but again, just engaging in questions and conversation, um, in that sense. The one thing I'd like to also point out in my own journey, I've found very much challenged by the you could say the technological age of what it means to be a musician. Like and it can be alienating or it can be empowering. And I think it's time that we can ask ourselves how we can carve out a territory based on our own terms, rather than trying to either single-handedly figure out what's next for ourselves and try to support ourselves in the certain kind of industry flows that are happening. I think it's good to take a step back and collectively sound out actually what it is that we need and want, and um, how it can best suit our needs, and then re-engage in the world from there. Um, you want to say something as well, Sheena? We have.
Yeah, so I just had a few thoughts as, Jonathan and Andrew were brainstorming, and I wanted to just bring in this energy of inclusion and perspective. And so I just thought, yeah, sharing my thoughts on the development of this community. And so I did write this out. I wish I could do everything from memory. That'd be great. So how do we find our way in our creative landscape when the best of our intentions and the intentions of the people we trust, love, and respect are molded by modernity? We are perpetually skewed by gender, race, religion, nationality, economic status, privilege, appearance, education, mobility, family, location, and our own fears and insecurities, doubts, confidence, and beliefs. No one is implicitly unbiased. The past and present social environments mold our understanding of how these things are, and we accept all those things until we learn to question them. I identify as a Jewish 38-year-old white woman seeking for those same reflections, not to distort my vision. I've played the game, but I'm learning now not how to win, but how to co-create a healthier space to play. However cozy this new space is, it is not a place to settle, though we may find comfort here. Modernity will not melt into the background, absolving all biases, tendencies, and brandished truths. Revolution is an infinite process that requires the creative minds and hearts of the age to expand beyond the confines of security and comfort. We must be supportive, inclusive, focused, driven, alert, self-affirmed, plastic beings full of idealistic hopes and wild, fantastical dreams. Mobilizing our dreams into realizations must not drag us through the tainted modern mud of externalization, thick with boasting, pushy, demoralizing, soul-crushing sludge encrusted with a superficial high-gloss veneer. As we reclaim our creative energies, the mud shall squelch beneath our toes, the nourishing product of soil and earth, waters, rivers, oceans, rains, and monsoons that teem to produce the lush beauty of the lotus. May we humbly marvel again and again at the process of creation, the beauty in the natural development of evolution, and there journey past the notions of all possibility.
Beautiful. Thank you, Shayna. Um, and I'm going to continue on a little bit here, just talking a little bit about some of the central values and questions that have come up so far, but these are only just sort of the beginning, and you could say pieces that are part of our story, but is not the only pieces in this collective story. It's important that we build a container of plurality, and at this point, in this presentation, we're sort of sharing where we're at, but there is an infinite space for other stories and other pieces to be added to this. So I think that one of the main things when I reflect on my process and what's important to me is an experimental praxis, the idea of engaging, whether it is in jazz or other forms of music, or just in general in life. I think that experimentalism is something that is important in some capacity. I've written here organic inquiry, like using frameworks of the organism. I mean, which is again, is a lot of the times is directly linked to the study of improvisation, but it's not limited to that either. And I was thinking about, and the next point, cross-cultural inquiry. Again, that's being very important in our journey, and I know a lot of people here as well. That's a main piece, a main question that they carry in their art and their life. And I was drawn to sort of this morning take a look at Don Cherry, who people call the father of world music, and he used that word organic music, and I think it's a beautiful word actually to describe something that would sort of unfold in some kind of a experimental container, and it takes a life of its own, But I think that cross-cultural inquiry is definitely important in general in this world, because it's sort of looking beyond the colonial gaze and looking and to embody and bring into the discourse other cultural ways of knowing and musical knowing. And I think that there's another, like the conversation of traditionalism and being contemporary, the idea of looking at that ancient sort of cultures or traditional cultures and how that is situated in the contemporary world. So that's another piece to this the question of this community, and how the community through the art can explore this. Looking at art as contemplation, I've been studying that a little bit. There's an academic field that's newly emerging called contemplative studies, and it seems like a lot of things in my life fall into that container. It's a very broad and open container. Again, it's not specifically, it doesn't need to be spiritual. I wrote that down because that's something that is important for me, but it can be secular, non-secular. It can be active contemplation by going and protesting. It can be individual contemplation with music, sitting with yourself or a small group. But it's a very open container, I think, a good conversation to have and bring into the dialogue of what is art for. Art as a technology of becoming is something I've also engaged in, and I think that a lot of people would, in our conversations too, have resonated with that idea of that we make art, we make music, not just to create some kind of a product or to create a lifestyle, but it's actually a technology of our becoming. Another thing that I think is important in terms of the community is that how can we activate these types of modalities, these types of inquiry, these types of questions that I think we can see in our art making, but how can we actually employ that into a collective practice. And I think this is where sonic ecology and organic inquiry really come in, is like, how can we be, not only artistic and musical with each other in the field of music and art, but in the way in which we can create a container for ourselves. And that's a really interesting and big question that goes far greater than the questions of just art and culture here. I mean, some term there have been people that have explored this, practice of radical democracy or spiritual anarchy, and what comes to mind is this place in India that Shane, Andrew, and I, and Justin, and Stefan. There's people, I can't see everybody in the call, but there a lot of people have been to Oroville, which is an experiment in spiritual anarchy, which is self-governance by not by any kind of preset ideals or commandments, but by the inner nature, of the individual harmonizing with the community. There's a lot more to talk about that. These are just questions. There we go. This is just a little bit more here about why a music label. And I think that the label, I think that in the early discussions between Andrew and I and Shayna and among others as well, it's definitely we're in a time where that the music label has ruptured and it's being questioned, and it's a transition right now. Nobody necessarily has any kind of monopoly on what that means. It's continually changing, and you can see across the board people that are trying to reinstate the old institutionalization of it. There's people that are trying to participate in rethinking it, and I think that we just want to have our chance to reimagine and co-create alongside other artists what a music label could be. So in my life, and I think, like looking at, this is one of the questions that came up, is that, what do you try to do as an artist? You create music and you try to get that out there. Either by self-producing it and marketing yourself. Basically, the multiple selves that an artist has in the contemporary world is extremely vast. It's never been vaster, and this independent idea is very liberating. But at the same time, it spreads you very thin, and it puts you into a lot of places that you may not be naturally good at. So do you join a big label? Or do you try to do it yourself and be creative on your own terms? Both have certain types of advantages, but at the same time, both have limitations. And I think that this is sort of an imagination. How can we find another way of looking at that disparity? I think that what I've seen is that the art music, it is not, and the type of art music that we're talking about, like cross-cultural, experimental, in this way, it doesn't conform to a certain image that you can say that it fits into a nice, easily packageable genre, which is the way in which generally labels work. They have some kind of a genre, and they start to create an image. And if you don't match that image, then you're not going to fit into their label, right? Their mold. So in that way, it's not easy for people to engage in this type of work to find that niche place. So some of the points here, this mouse is not working. Yeah, I was going to say, just getting to the bottom of this slide here, I think the proposing the idea that it's not that we want, or the ideal is to create some kind of an image that can be easily sold or flattened into a commercialized look, sound, or attitude. But I think that this community can be something that is based on multiple and a plural ways of, musically being in the world, or being with music. Like, those are some of the ways in which it's like our whole engaged practice is going to be drastically different from person to person. And I think that that's the greatest strength of this kind of an idea, is that it's not about conforming to a certain kind of an image, but it's about creating one. It's about, creating a solution to the problems, our individual problems through our art, and that is an individual image. That so I think that you could say that the catalog or the community will be a whole plurality of images that are different solutions to the to, that our art takes. Um, so in terms of where we're at, in terms of what we think monsoon music can be and what it can offer people, I've said a lot already. I think that there's definitely strength in like a conscious and engaged community. I think that there's gonna be something that's interesting and like-minded about the people that would want to be here together. Being like-minded is not necessary, but I think we need to share some kind of ideas about moving forward. Um, but again, I think that if we share questions, that's a lot better than sharing ideas of how we want to move forward. Um, I think there's no real fixed agenda to where we want to go, because I don't think that it's really, we don't want it to be up to Andrew, Shane, and I. We call ourselves facilitators, and I think that we are open to the needs of the community, and so that's I hope that leads to an openness in this project that you can engage with in however you feel that you need in this time. Um, I think the other thing that's really important to bring up is the idea of working based on your capacity. Everybody is in a different place in life. Everybody has a different way in which they can help and work in a collective. And I think that this like the best solution to that is allow that to arise naturally and for people to engage and to offer what they can based on their own situation. And so I think that this idea of having expectations of equality or of that's like going right back to like pure democracy. Is it going to be that or not? I mean, it's a question. And I think that I would rather sort of have people be able to work on their own terms and work for something that they truly believe in. Um, and I think that can sort of stimulate and sort of rechange the last point here is, then how the nature of work can really change um, outside of the normal kind of time, money paradigm that we're totally part of. Um, so there's a couple other points here. I think some of them are quite simple and self-explanatory. I talked about the many selves of the independent artist. I mean, Deleuze wrote and Guattari, Capitalism and Schizophrenia. I mean, there's something that's very true, I feel, in the way that I feel that I am as an artist, that is very much broken down into many, many things. And some of those things I struggle with more than others. So I think the idea of consolidating resources and networks and helping people when you can offer something that's one of your strengths and have other people help you with your weaknesses, I think that's all pretty inherent in this type of work. Okay, I'm gonna now just turn it over to Andrew to talk just a little bit about the specific of what we want to offer into this community right now. I think I've sort of covered a lot of the questions, a lot of the bigger kind of ideas in which I hope you guys can engage with again on your own terms and in your own way. And we will be opening up for questions just a little bit after this. But I think that this is just going to give you guys, everybody, a better understanding of just sort of right now what are the sort of the pillars that we're sort of offering in, or the main kind of framework, you could say. Yeah, exactly. So.
Thanks, John. Could you can you try? I think there might be some people wanting to get in. If you want to check the waiting room there.
We've lost our cursor.
Yeah. Okay. Stop screen share.
Can we get someone who knows the tech to get over to their place quick? No.
Yeah, got it.
Would love that.
All right, so we're letting in another round of people. Great. All right, and
okay, I can update how many people are here. Okay, good.
Sorry about that. Yeah, this share has its benefits, but it's all right. So I'm gonna go back to the screen share, and you can see this slide.
Oh,
All right.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, speaking to what Jonathan kind of, as he spoke a lot about kind of the, like you said, the questions and the things that have come up and how quickly these ideas have evolved, looking back at where Monsoon Music started and where it's come and what, recently, even just the idea, I was kind of in this space here, especially in this lockdown where we're all feeling, forcefully, just changed because we were saying, well, now everyone's in a situation. What do we do? And so that, I think it made me just look back at all the things that we together and myself individually had been worked on, and kind of that idea of like, okay, what are all these different elements that as artists, what do we have to do? And for myself, I mean, I've always been really interested and inspired to do other work other than just music. And I feel comfortable in some of those domains. But I know other artists that are not, and Jonathan and I, we have our differences in that too. And so I think everyone here has their own individual way to approach that. And when I look at the group right now of all of you wonderful people, is like, we have some of our greatest supporters from our parents and family here to some of, our great collaborators, people and other artists we've worked with, some really great friends. We have some of our great teachers that inspire us and that have shown us through their inspiration and their work, how we want to show up in this world. So I think when I think about this and what's kind of evolved into in this conversation is like, how do we engage our community and how do we involve the circles of our communities together? Because all of you are here because we're all connected in some way. Jonathan said like-minded. Well, I'm sure we would find some differences in some of the things we think about, but we're like-minded because we're connected in some way that has some sort of an energetic connection between us. And so we want to engage that. And when I think about how we have that connection, but we don't engage in that in the current ways that we connect. So maybe we are all on Facebook, or we all are on different social medias, or we have our music out there, but we don't tend to interact because that intentionality gets lost in the sea of all of these possibilities. And so I think a big part of this is like, can we really create a catalyst for us to come together and share ideas and really try to form, how do we want to share this with the world, and kind of break down those gaps between, oh, well, only the artists have to do their thing and only the supporters have to do their thing, and we have to try and interface between each other in the traditional ways. So is that a possibility that we can find? And if it's something that there's that strong energy and that strong interest and inspiration from that, then it will become that automatically. And if there isn't, because there's, like Jonathan said, everyone has their own space and time and their own ability to offer, then it will become what it needs to become in that way. So I think that's really the idea of, for me, what I feel inspired in this moment to be connecting with all of you and to further more conversations about that. Another, I guess, aside from that, the thing that's inspired me too is looking back at what Jonathan shared with me, and a lot of stuff, philosophy, which I think I need to read some of the books he's read, but the idea is that I am inspired by all of that. And so that, that gets me going. And when I think about Monsoon and the things that I have learned from living in India or studying music in India and coming back here and living back in the place where I grew up, is how to take inspiration from the world and specifically from nature. And so that's the idea of kind of using the ecology of nature as a roadmap, as a way to act. So instead of us thinking that we're these superior, human beings, that we do our own things, like, why do we not put ourselves more in tune with nature as a map? And is there a way for us to work that way, just as the ecology of nature would work? And is there a way for us to interact in that way? And so that means everybody can interact in a way that is organic to themselves. So that's kind of the idea. And when we try to reduce that to, okay, what does that mean? What are we going to at least hold the framework or container? I think that what that looks like, or what we've talked about that looking like, and this is what I guess our intention, Jonathan and I, and whoever else may want to join us, wants to do, is to hold regular meetings where we can discuss these things together as a group like this. So that for now it's set as maybe every 2 months. And then obviously through that, trying to share that to a wider audience. So whether that's using the current audience that we have from Monsoon-Music, or growing that audience to including the circles of people that you might have in your networks, but to share through that the things that come out of these meetings, and they come out of this in this way, like a think tank for that. And then obviously anything else that might be created from that, like podcast, discussing, and these can be the possibilities for a lot of these to happen with different groups of people within the collective is all there, and it can be a platform. And again, then that also means that the way that we interact with each other can be done on the terms that we want to with each other. So whether that means that we just want to collaborate because we're super inspired to reconnect and do something, or whether that means we need to engage in some sort of trade economy in that way, like that totally is open for all of us to discuss and figure out between everyone who wants to be involved. And then obviously on a more outward facing way is like, how then do we involve other partnerships or organizations and other people that are already in a way, I'm sure, doing these things in their own space or in their own area. And so obviously then there's lots of discussions about what's the best route to go in terms of, what needs to be on a website, what's the best way to present music in that way, and whether it's through like traditional things like independent things like Bandcamp, or other ways to present music, and also YouTube, all the different channels, and how do we want to do that and join our forces, and what the experiences are. How do we collectively use all of our experience to come up with something that we feel can be useful in the world. You can switch the.
Yep. Trying. Oh gosh. Nope.
I mean, I have to say, I'm really impressed with John's design of these screens. It's always been, I've been the one who's done most of the design stuff, but I find them quite beautiful. So obviously, what's next? What's next is for us to go on to wrapping up this so that we can practice in the idea of listening. I think we already talked a little bit about, on this page, I guess there's more about, depending on what we discuss in this next little bit, these are things that we'll make notes of and then come together on. But that can go into the idea of like the platform. How do we meet? How do we collectively do that? How do we represent ourselves, the underrepresentation of women and non-white Indigenous peoples, LGBTQ communities, so that it's really the diversity of all of us in that sense. And then, obviously more discovery. Where does that need to lead us? Okay. Open to brainstorming. So that's all I think what's coming up. Where I think we should go now is presenting.